And today, the subject we have chosen is to talk about, to understand more about spike protein. More people will join, but we are committed to time. And the rest of the people can watch this program as we are live. And we are also going to be live on Facebook page of CMAAO from today, since last time. So people can also watch it live on the CMAAO page of Facebook. So we have with us Dr. Prakash from Nepal. Others will join. And I'll go slow so that I don't have to repeat when others join. So I'm going to show some slides with this. So my focus here will be on spike protein today. And we will talk about more about the spike protein in great detail. So let me take this picture on the front side so that, yes. And if we go back to the virus structure, we have a virus on the above, and which virus is depicted, the various components or virus are depicted. So the virus has a 5 end and the 3 end, so 5 terminal end and the 3 terminal end. And then it has ORF1A and ORF1B, which contains 16 non-structural proteins. So NSP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 16 are present in ORF1A and ORF1B. Out of this, ORF14 is important, which is responsible for the proofreading mechanism. Then comes is the S protein. Then comes is ORF3A, 3B, then envelope, then membrane, then ORF6, ORF7A, 7A, and ORF8A, 8B, ORF9B. Then we have nucleocapsid, and then we have the tail. So there is a tail, which is 3 end, and we have a top, which is the 5 end. Then ignore the second line, go back to the third line, which is more in detail. This is what the topic is, understanding more about the spike protein. So this has two components, S1 and S2. The role of S2 is to form pores, to dissolve. So the S2 component basically creates pores inside wherever it enters. And the S1 component is to merge. It merges and enters inside. So creating a cleavage is the role of S2. Merging is the role of S1. So that the ultimate job is for the nuclear capsid to liberate its messenger RNA inside the cell. The focus has been on S1 component of the protein. Everybody is concentrating on S1. So there is a cleavage sites. There are two cleavage sites. These are at 685 and between 816 and 834 amino acids. So the total amino acids here are 1255 amino acids. And it has two sites of cleavage. And that is, and then it has a portion called NTD, RBD, RBM, RBD. So we have been focusing on RBD and RBM part of the virus. But if you see, there is a blue portion called NTD. we have been ignoring this part of the virus called NTD. There are different types of classifications, but we will focus on the upper virus with the second slide in between them. So the bottom one is only to show that what is NTD. So NTD is a N terminal domain, which is just before RBD. So all our focus has been on making a vaccine which neutralizes RBD and RBM, making a monoclonal antibody against RBD or RBM, creating a polyclonal antibodies against RBD and RBM. Today, our focus is going to be, is NTD important component or not? Now, if NTD is important, then it becomes very, 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 very important for us to have antibodies against NTD. Apart from that, once we have understood the role of NTD, in the next Saturday, we will discuss the non-S part of the virus. What is the importance of ORF1A and ORF1B, against which we are not making antibodies at all? What is the importance of 3A, 3B, E, M, and N? Because we are not making, vaccine is not producing antibodies against non-S part of the virus unless it is an inactivated virus. Unless it is an inactivated virus, which is producing antibodies against all the parts of the virus. So today in S, we concentrate on NTD part, not N-terminal domain part. So if you see, this is what we will discuss next time. So all the ORF1A and ORF1B portion, so the portion of ORF1A and ORF1B is responsible for virus replication, proofreading, suppresses cellular immunity, counters host innate immunity, stabilize the structures required for replication, RNA polymerase and replicase complex and proofreading mechanism. Therefore, mutations covering in these areas will have lot of hindrance. And if we do not produce antibodies against these areas, you may end up into a problem. Now what people say is, I will come back, and these are spike protein receptor binding, initiate infection. ORF3 is for virus release. Envelope is for virus assembly. Membrane forms the virus envelope. ORX 6 to 9 suppresses cellular immunity, virus release, and nuclear capsid is for RNA binding and interferon resistance. Therefore, every part of the virus is important. Every part of the virus is important. Now, I'll come back to one slide. No, just hold on. I'll bring one slide to make you understand. Just give me a second. In the meantime, that slide is important to anyway. So when the virus enters inside my body, it enters through two pathways. ACE2 pathway. So when the virus enters my body, I will come back to this slide. Yes. When the virus enters in my body, it enters through two pathways. The pathway, this is called as a pathway of ACE2 receptors. So my body's ACE2 receptors binds with the spike protein. But this virus can also enter my cell directly through transmembrane route called TMP-RSS2. So this virus enters in my cell through breaks in that virus, through protease, through finding a pores in my virus. So S2 portion of the protein makes pores inside my cell from where the virus enters. And ACE and ACE2 part is one way, and the second part is TMP-RSS. That means the spike protein part of the my virus, but if any other part of my body of the virus other than the spike protein facilitates entry of the virus other than the spike protein or ACE inhibitor route, then infections will keep on occurring, but they will be mild. That will explain why mild infection can continue in spite of the vaccine. Now, we are talking about a term that is called Scarans. Every day we are listening new variation, new variation, new variation. They are called as Scarians. They scare you. They may not be of importance. For it to be have important, it should be infectious, it should be virulent, and have immune invasion. So three things are required. A new variation should be infectious, virulent, and have immune invasion. That means today, most of the new variations, somebody is having infectious, somebody is making it more virulent, and something is doing it as an immune invasion. All three are not present. Even the UK variant is more infectious and more virulent, but does not cause immune invasion. South African variant is more immune invasion, more infection, but that is not virulent. That's what we need to understand. These are different types of strains occurring in UK, South Africa, Brazil, and then we have New York 2, and California. Then we have Indian strains. So all these strains are coming, and our focus has been on RBD and RBM. Today we are going to focus on ND. We are going to focus on the area called as NTD, which is amino acid 13 to amino acid 318. Easiest way to remember is, remember the unlucky number called 13. So there is a unlucky number 13, and then you reverse it, it becomes 31, and add whatever number you want. So 318, 13, 31. So let's see now these two strains we see. UK, there is a deletion in 6970, which is NTD. There is a deletion in 144, which is NTD. So NTD now is becoming more important, and there is a deletion in South African, and that is 241, 242, which we will come. That is again in NTD. Nowadays, NTD is becoming more important than RBD and RBM, because NTD and terminal domain is the area for deletion. Most of the deletions of amino acids will occur in NTD portion. So the today's is we want to divert our discussion, because if you really want to control the pandemic, we have to think laterally, and we have to move from RBD and RBM vision to NTD vision. Why UK strain is more dangerous? It came from minks, it came from Denmark, and it started with 6970 deletion. Now, RBD, RBM, we have not seen a single deletion. We have only seen deletions in NTD. Therefore, RBD, RBM mutations can self-correct themselves because of proofreading mechanisms, but a deletion occurring in NTD cannot be corrected. Therefore, we will now concentrate on various deletions on NTD. What makes UK strain the most dangerous is 6970 deletion and Y144 deletion. And here you can see again that there are in South Africa also, there is 241 to 243 deletion. Therefore, most important is UK and then South Africa. In Brazil, it is a local problem. The virus is not yet spreading all over. It does not have a deletion. UK has multiple deletion at 2 different places, and South Africa, virus in South Africa has a single deletion, a single area deletion, that is 241 to 42. Now, we all have been concentrating on RBD, and we say there are 44, 45, 486, 493, 494, 501, 505. They are the critical areas of mutations. So up till now, our focus had been on RBD amino acids at these numbers. But now we are talking about the deletions in the N-terminal domain. Now, if you compare the SARS with MERS, SARS has 98 deletions. So deletion makes a new virus, not the additions. So this confirms the importance of NTD. Between SARS and MERS, 98 amino acids are less. Now this has been, people says that SARS has been far worse than why COVID-19 is more worse than SARS because it causes less interferon suppression. And here comes the role of ORF6. Now come back here, ORF6 sitting here. So this is ORF6, which is a non-S portion, is equally important. Now the people are emphasizing that some people are saying is why an inactivated vaccine may be better in certain circumstances because it takes care of non-S protein antibodies. So this study which has talked about is, they are talking about the importance of ORF6, that ORF6 is responsible for interferon resistance. This is what I have just tagged, that the most dangerous, this is the study which talks about most dangerous is New York, but still it is not dangerous enough. This is a study which talks about, in a study posted as a reprint in November and published February 3, scientists showed that COVID-2 tends to delete portions of the RNA that encode the NTD of the spike that its proofreaders cannot detect. So the whole article talks about that viruses, if you, why I'm saying is, if you produce antibodies, vaccines against focused on S protein, then NTD will take over and will start deleting itself. So therefore, it assumes that future mutations to escape the present vaccines will be NTD deletions, So this is NTD is the key difference between SARS-1 and CoV-1 and CoV-2. It means if a CoV-3 appears, it will be only through the NTD. They have done that the way NTD moves, changes its shape, matters. So therefore, if a SARS-CoV-3 is to come, that means if a COVID 2022, 23, 24, whenever it comes, it will come by changing its NTD, not by the RBD or RBM or other portions. It will only come by changes in the R. So they say SARS-CoV-1 moves faster, it activates and deactivates, which does not give it much time to stick to the human cell. The movements of NTD are so fast that it does not give time to attach. But in CoV-2, NTD is more firm, and therefore deletion becomes very important in NTD. This is in New York City, now they are coming forward, a deletion, a amino acid change called 235G, which is again in NTD. So now this is New York City change may be even bigger than the UK change because of N-terminal mutation called D235G. Remember, it is the same D614G, that the same mutation change now is in 235. Now, nobody is talking about 235. Everybody is talking about 484 or 501. Maybe any change in NTD becomes more important. This is what I talked about in UK. 2 NTD deletions, 69, 70, and 145. And this is it talks about in South African, there is a deletion of 242 to 244. So this is what, and in South Africa, we have already written one cluster in NTD, lots of changes in NTD which are occurring. Now, what happens in, before I come back to this, what happens in the spike protein? The spike protein has 3 promoters, 1, 2, and 3. This is a spike protein which is closed. You can see the ACE receptor in green is open, but the spike protein red is closed. And now you can see it is open. Now you can see this is open. Now you can see, I can show you again. This is the spike protein. This is the spike protein which is closed, and this is how it opens. The spike protein is open. This opening of spike protein, unless it is open, it will not close to the ACE2 receptors. Imagine the center one entering into the green, and then the above and the lower keep forming it. So in SARS-1 and MERS, this closer and slower was fast. In CoV-2, it has become slow so that it gets time to bind to the ACE receptors. And that's what we say, that NTD mutations makes the binding more stronger. Now we come back to the most important thing. Now this is how it talks about. These are called closed on the right side. All 3 are down. Then we have 3 different types of closers. It can be 1 up and 2 down. That is incomplete closure. These are 2 up and 1 down. And third is all 3 up. So there can be 4 situations depending upon the mutations in NTD. You can have all the 3 are open, or all 3 are closed, or it can be in between, 1 up and 2 down, 2 up and 1 down. So there's four situations, four different types of mutations will increase binding of the antibody to the antigen. Now they are talking about is 90% of the deletions in virus occurs in only 4 regions in NTD. That means majority of the deletions will cover in NTD. And amongst these NTD, maximum deletions will occur in prefixed areas. Let us see them. And these are called as NTD RDR1, recurrent. This is called, these sites are called recurrent deleting regions. And this will be RDR1, RDR2, RDR3, and RDR4 position. Amongst in NTD, 1 and 3 are on one side, 2 and 4 are on above side. Now you will see that in UK edition, in the virus in the UK, the deletion has been in RDR1 and RDR2. And you can see majority of the deletions will occur in RDR1 and RDR2. So therefore, recurrent, the deletions are frequent in 4 sites. That's what it is. RDR1 and 3 on one side, RDR2 and 4 on other side. I'm not going into details because R1 comes from amino acid 69 to 70. So therefore, 6970 deletion is R1 part of NTD. 145 is the R2 part of NTD. And 240, 243 of South Africa is in R4 part of the NTD document. This is a slide given to me by the South African Medical Association. And this is basically talks about is neutralizing antibodies. And they take each of the 3 petals of the spike protein carries a hook, which is responsible for the control. And this is different types of hooking resistance antibodies will develop. When they says 484 enhancing binding affinity to ACE2 and confers resistance to class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. This is what I said, how they close and how they open. And this is what I have shown. Now, if I see this 4 different situations, first situation is all 3 are closed. This is 1 open, 2 open, 3 open. These are the 4 different situations of NTD because of the spike protein. It is not moving. And this is what I want to show, that in D614G mutation, all are closed. And as you say, all open, probability of AST binding and perfusion, and then you can find out over a period of time when there was a change from 614D to 614G, the mutation causes making it 1 open and 2 open. So the topic today, what I wanted to discuss is to go back and show you the first slide again, and that is, do not ignore the NTD portion of the virus. Anything, so suppose we say, will this virus go away? The answer is go, no. Will this, now I was reading about the flu vaccine, and then I realized all flu vaccines are inactivated vaccines. All respiratory vaccines have been inactivated vaccines. So if I say about inactivated vaccine, it is a broader. It is like a la carte in a restaurant. When you go to a food, you go for a buffet. That is a inactivated vaccine is a buffet. You get little bit of everything. But if you go for a la carte, you only order for a one food item, that's spike protein, you will get in abundance. So spike protein vaccines will give you abundant antibodies only against the S protein, zero against other things. So therefore, ORF1A, ORF1B, ORF6 antibodies will not form. We still don't know their role. And the vaccines of a inactivated vaccine will give you little bit antibodies against everything. And now the role is coming, which we have never talked about NTD other than RBD and RBM. We have been talking about RBD and RBM. Now the literature says also focus on NTD. Now I'm still trying to find out the literature about all the vaccines, that whether they have included the NTD portion of a spike protein prominently or not, I don't know. But if there is going to be a new virus coming, if a new version of the virus comes, it will come because of NTD and not because of RBD. And if you go on hitting the RBD and RBM without hitting the NTD will mutate, mutate, and mutate and convert it into a new virus. So today's anticipation, what we have spoken about is, what is the possibility of SARS coming to MERS, MERS to CoV-2, from CoV-2 to CoV-3. And if I go back, if I understand little bit of immunology, it gives me an emphasis that CoV-3 will come if we focus our antibodies and our vaccines only on spike protein and ignore the NTD portion of the spike protein, or ignore non-S protein ORFs, which are still people are not talking. I only got an article about ORF6. What is the importance of ORF6, which I got it only in the last 48 hours. People have now started working on, so therefore we may end up in requiring the third vaccine, and the third vaccine may be different. Maybe a time will touch when we start talking about that we take multiple vaccines and not the repeat dose of the same vaccine. Over to the chair.
Thank you, President. Sorry, a bit late today because I have a lot of inpatients in the hospital.
So let me repeat for 5 minutes again for people who have come late. Normally, a virus has S protein and a non-S protein. It has, first of all, it has two types of proteins called structural proteins and non-structural proteins. Structural proteins are S protein, E protein, M protein, and nuclear capsid. These are the components of a structural proteins. Then we have non-structural proteins, which does not make a structure. Let me show you the slide. Let me show you the slide. So we see on the top, the ORF1A and ORF1B contains 16 non-structural proteins. These are called as NSP. What happened? So these are called as ORF1A, ORF1B. This contains 16 NSPs, out of which NSP 14 is responsible for proofreading along with NSP 15 and 16. So ORF 1A and 1B are non-structural proteins. Mutations here will cause a havoc. So if you don't concentrate on ORF1B, and if NSP14 gets mutated, it will become a flu-like virus without a proofreading mechanism. So if ORF14 gets deleted by somehow, it will change its characteristics and become a non-proofreading virus. People are just thinking about it, but nobody is working about it. Then we have ORF6, which is very, very, very important. Then we have 3A, 3B, 7, 8, 9. So these are the open reading frames, which are non-structural proteins present in the virus inside the cytoplasm. Most of them are enzymes, and they carry a lot of importance. E, M, and N. N is responsible for nucleocapsid interferon resistance. Nucleocapsid, if mutates, it will change the way interferon works as the primary action. Then we have S protein, which has 3 leaflets. It's a trimer type, S1, S2 unit, and each one has a S1 and S2 unit. So there are 3 spike proteins. They merge together to become one spike. Each spike protein has a S1 subunit and a S2 subunit. S1 subunit has RBD and RBM. Then before the RBD and RBM, there is NTD called N-terminal domain, which is seen in the bottom one very clearly what is NTD. So our focus has been on RBD and RBM, thinking that RBD and RBM is most responsible for attachment to the ACE inhibitor. What we should always remember is that in a cell, the virus can also enter through non-ACE2 pathway called transmembrane pathway that is being controlled by serine proteases. They causes holes in the cell membrane and the virus can enter. So if you are going to attack only the RBD and RBM, now we are getting lots of vaccines who are only concentrating on RBD vaccine, RBM vaccines. The more specific you will become. So if you only have a vaccine against RBD and RBM, NTD will flare up, or non-RBM, RBD pathways will enter. That means PMP RSS pathway will take over, and the virus will enter with the help of S2 subunit, whose job is to create pores inside the cell to bypass ACE inhibitor, to bypass ACE receptor, enter inside the cell. So this NTD was the subject of today, that deletion substitutions occurs in RBD and RBM. And whenever there is a substitution, proofreading mechanism can auto-correct it. Deletions occurs in the NTD. There are 4 areas there are 4 amino acids locations in NTD, R1, R2, R3, R4, where maximum deletions comes. Once the amino acid is deleted, it cannot be auto-corrected. It's permanent. For SARS-2 to become from MERS, 98 amino acids got deleted, 90% of them from NTD. Therefore, if SARS-2 has to convert to SARS-3, it has to continue deleting NTD, and that will only happen if we concentrate on only RBD and RBM. That's the reason sometimes back I said that an inactivated vaccine may be better. It produces less antibodies, but a cocktail of antibodies So it is more like a polyclonal antibodies of a low degree against everything. The more specific we become in our vaccines, other parts of the viruses will get mutated for its advantage. So at this moment, NTD, that is N-terminal domain amino acid 13 to 318. Now you see why UK strain is more significant. 6970, where it is NTD. 145 and 140 deletion, where it is NTD. Why South African is number 2 virulent virus than UK? Where is the mutation? 241, 242, where it is NTD. So deletions occurs in NTD. Deletions are more important. So next time when we talk about a mutation, we should say, is it substitution or is it deletion? If it is deletion, where it is it in NTD or non-NTD? If it is NTD, is it in R1, R2, R3 or R4? So I'll just show you quickly the R1, the phases of, this is what I said. These are the 4 locations in NTD called R1, R2, R3 and R4. And you can see most of them are in NTD. So all the events are in NTD. And we can see 6970 is in R1, 144 in UK1 is in R2, and then 243, 244 in South African is in R4 portion of the NTD. So the whole purpose of today's interaction was to make all of us aware that there is something like NTD, and the future, all our discussions and people will be starting talking about NTD, NTD, and NTD. Thank you.
Thank you, President, for that always illuminating talk on the latest in viral variants and mutations and deletions. I open to the floor to ask if anybody has any questions for President.
If not, quickly we share each country's report, quickly starting from Hong Kong. What's new in Hong Kong and what's the latest?
Alvin, do you want to tell us what's happening in Hong Kong?
You'll have to unmute.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Mr. President, Mr. Chair. In fact, I'm sorry that I had just managed to join a few minutes ago, so I could not catch up with the excellent lecture of the President today because perhaps a connection problem in our area. So, but anyway, I would be grateful if the President could let us have the your PowerPoint and the slides again. And so I know the topic just now you have been mentioning about is very important about the mutation and the update of the COVID. Yeah, in Hong Kong we did not have the problem of the difficulties in managing the mutations yet. So only about 10 confirmed cases have been found to be the UK variant, and they have been traced, and no spread of this variants in our community yet. For the South African and Brazil variants, we did not have any data that they had arrived in Hong Kong from the passengers entering Hong Kong. So, I mean, the passengers, of course, Hong Kong citizens, perhaps they usually when they come back, we would have tested all of them, and then the virology lab would also find the genome of those viruses. And so far, not one Brazil or South African variants were found to my knowledge. And we have started the vaccination since the 26th of February. And well, unfortunately, there were a few cases that were associated with some outcome which might not be related to the vaccine directly, but that had already caused doubts in the citizens, and many had hesitance to go for vaccination now. One case was a patient with after 2 hours or 1 hour, less than 1 hour after vaccination, developed atrial fibrillation. Well, of course, atrial fibrillation was not on the list of the common adverse effects causing compensation in other areas. So, but of course, we need to observe for any relationship in search for other areas unusual adverse reactions. I don't know whether it occurs in India or in Singapore or other places. Another more lethal case was a diabetic man, 63 years old, had nothing for 2 days after the vaccination, but developed dyspnea and chest discomfort 2 days after vaccination. And then he was sent to the public hospital where his situation, his condition deteriorated very rapidly and died within 6 hours. So he was recorded to have got the vaccination in the accident and emergency department. But when he was admitted into the ward, the doctors perhaps were not so aware that he had the vaccination, but that in fact didn't matter much. So we are waiting for the biopsy, the autopsy reports. But however, the experts the scientific advisory committee had said that it should not be directly related to the vaccine. But in fact, all of us, of course, know that it could not be excluded from the possibility because, we had no data yet from the autopsy result and other biochemical or toxicology reports yet. So, anyway, it's unfortunate. So initially, the vaccination schemes was overbooked, but now many people have withdrawn their vaccination booking. So that's mostly our vaccination program. For the COVID update, we are now down to single digits for several days. That is less than 10 confirmed cases a day. Perhaps 1/3 of those confirmed cases, however, belong to the category of unknown origins. So there's still a danger of hidden cases spreading in the community. So thank you very much.
I'll take 5 minutes, the chair, because now Dr. Elvin has spoken about it that Dr. Chong 2 weeks back also talked about an heart attack and MI developing after the COVID-19. In Mumbai, in Maharashtra, we had a 40-year-old male died within half an hour of receiving a vaccine. And then we have an MBBS student dying after 21st days of the vaccine after developing COVID-19. And we have approximately 30 deaths, according to the government, unrelated. But let's talk about what's happening in the body and how can a death occur. Let's talk about, it'll take only a couple of minutes. One is when the virus enters my body, the body tries to remove it immediately by saying not mine, not mine, not mine. That is called as IgE Th2 response. That is called T helper 2 response, where mast cell gets activated, not the lymphocytes. And this mast cell will immediately release histamine or tryptase, and they will immediately release the T cell response to kill these antigens. So you get 3 different types of response. The first is within 15 minutes called anaphylaxis. Most likely this person died of anaphylaxis. The second response is called as after 4 hours or 6 hours, non-IgE mediated, that is urticaria, that is a angioneurotic edema response. And the third response will come after 5 days in the local skin area, which has something like lepromine response or a tuberculin or a Montoux test response, where your skin will have lots of type 2, type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. This is one reactions you will get. The death is only in the first one, and that is in the first 15 minutes. And that will only happen if you are hypersensitive to polysorbate 80, which is present as an ingredient in all the vaccines in the world. And polysorbate 80 is present in refresh tears. So refresh eye drops contains polysorbate. So all those people who are in doubt, they can put the refresh tear drops in their eyes and see whether they get redness or not. If they get a redness, they are sensitive to polysorbate 80. That takes care of the anaphylaxis. The third response, second I will come. The third response will be an antibody response, which will come after 2 weeks. 3 types of antibodies will develop: corrupt antibodies, non-neutralizing antibodies, and neutralizing antibodies. Corrupt antibodies means they cause disease enhancement because they are so low, and they are basically not the one which is, this is what I'm talking about. If NTD takes over, if a non-S portion takes over, these will be corrupt antibodies. They will tell you the alternative paths to enter. And then we have binding non-neutralizing antibodies, which will allow the infection to appear, which probably happened in the doctor who died after developing COVID on 22nd day. That on 22nd days, his antibodies were non-binding, non-neutralizing. Therefore, he developed a severe COVID and died. And the third is called as a neutralizing antibodies, which will give you full immunity. Now, in between the two, the most important thing is part 2 of the vaccine, which is called reactogenicity. So a viral protein has 3 portions: immunogenicity, then allergogenicity, and reactogenicity. Now, reactogenicity is when the virus enters my body, when you give an injection, gamma interferon takes over. Gamma interferon will try to kill the virus or the viral protein, will produce fever, little bit muscle ache, and it will produce fatigue. It may cause a local reaction. This is an immediate reaction on day 1. So on day 1, this gamma interferon can be exaggerated. It can lead to increased sympathetic activity. Suddenly you may have tachycardia. Suddenly you may have an accelerated hypertension. So in susceptible individuals, take an antihypertensive dose and then go. On day 2, when the protein enters my cell and the cell starts replicating, and when the protein starts forming, NK cells, CD8 cells, they appear. They will try to kill these cells. They cannot allow these cells to be present, so they will produce TNF alpha, and they will produce IL-6, and they will produce CRP. If that response is okay, it's fine. But in some cases, that inflammatory response can precipitate transverse myelitis, can precipitate facial palsy, can precipitate meningoencephalitis, can precipitate immune inflammation anywhere in the body, only in susceptible individuals. So how can people die? So if there is a exaggerated cytokine response, when the CRP is formed, fibrinogen will form. Now, this will form because of pyroptosis, and this will form because of macrophage 1. Now, go back to MI. If you have a plaque with a central lipid core, that means the plaque is unstable and the fibrous cap is thin. The fibrous cap will be thin only if M1 macrophages are on higher side. M2 macrophages makes the fibrous cap, and M1 macrophages dissolve the fibrous cap. Now, if a patient is having unstable, he's having a plaque, he is 40% or 50% heart blockage, and the plaque is having a thin fibrous cap of less than 0.65 millimeter. And because there is a predominant M1 macrophages, now this virus or the vaccine will increase M1 macrophages reaction. That M1 with the original M1 will collide together, and they will puncture the fibrous cap and precipitate an MI. Therefore, in all cases who have underlying high CRP, I am suggesting a dose of statin before the vaccine. So if you take a aspirin and a colchicine before the vaccine, your plaque cannot rupture. You are stabilizing the plaque. So for me, something you say, he is having in angry, anger can precipitate MI, flu can precipitate MI, infections can precipitate MI. That's all because of high M1 macrophages. So if you suspect a underlying high M1 macrophages response, then you stabilize that M1 macrophage before giving the vaccines. So therefore, vaccines are a trigger, not the cause of the illness. Remember why the government is saying not related to vaccine is, it is a trigger. The trigger phenomena is the immunoinflammation as a result of the vaccine. So remember, if you expect, suppose somebody says, we want to break a bad news to my patient's father, the patient has died. So you says, it can precipitate MI, you take this, and take this. Therefore, vaccine can feel like a trigger. The maximum trigger comes from shingles vaccine. All those people, all those precautions when you take for giving a shingles herpes zoster vaccine, if you take these precautions with the COVID-19 vaccine, nobody will die. The maximum reactogenicity is shingles vaccine. That's how I'm going to answer it. Yes.
Thank you, President. Very interestingly, President, my staff in my clinic, exactly a week after the first dose, she developed Bell's palsy.
Yes.
And I reported it as a side effect to our authorities here. And I also had a word with our Deputy Director of Medical Services and so on. And they have actually looked into that. But they, of course, as you said, they still believe it's not a direct causal effect. And Bell's palsy is actually quite common anyway. But I highlighted it to my authorities here of the staff in my clinic. So we put her on high dose prednisolone and so on. So it's a bit disturbing to have this. And of course, all our other staff in the practice has become a bit hesitant about the vaccine.
That's what I say, colchicine. If you give them colchicine 1 day before and 2 days after on the day of vaccine, these types of immunoinflammations will not come. This is immunoinflammation reaction because of a TNF interleukins which are being produced. That's what I only said, these are going to come. You are going to see all. You are going to see transverse myelitis, you are going to see meningoencephalitis, you are going to see Bell's palsy, you are going to see trigeminal neuralgia. All this we are going to see. All this we are going to see. And that's expected. That's expected of any reactogenic. And now I am only talking about when I know it is a reactogenic. Why don't I take a pre-medication for a day? That's all.
Yeah. And this is despite we told her to take, we didn't ask her to take, I think we told her to take some Ponstan mefenamic acid as you told us to. We also asked them to take some aspirin.
But that was taken before the vaccine or after the vaccine?
Before. We asked her to take, and despite that, it's still okay. But we didn't ask her to take colchicine though. Some of our staff didn't really want to take colchicine.
So what was the baseline C-reactive protein?
C-reactive protein, I think was, I have to check, but she's obese, so I think the CRP is a little bit up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. In a CRP, see, we are saying very clearly, we are saying to prevent ACS, take ACS, aspirin, colchicine, and a statin. And if you have a microalbumin positive, if your CRP is more than 1, you prevent immunoinflammation. That's all.
Yeah.
So if your microalbumin is positive, or if your CRP is more than 1, prevent immunoinflammation. And immunoinflammation will present with Bell's palsy.
Very, very interesting, and very unfortunate, my staff. So she's a little bit, distressed, so to speak.
No, add colchicine now. With steroid, add colchicine, she will recover much faster.
We've given her high dose steroid, 60 milligrams.
I know. But steroids, we need to give a steroid sparing, because otherwise steroid we will give it for 7 to 10 days only. But her inflammation is going to last. So colchicine is a steroid sparing anti-inflammatory. Because she is obese, I would give a colchicine with her.
All right, I'll do that. Thank you, President. I'll do that. As for our local situation here in Singapore, the vaccine rollout is ongoing. We are expecting to hit pending supply, depending on supply situation. We're hoping to hit about 60 to 70,000 doses daily, in which case we will finish the whole population in 100 days. So that's what we're aiming for. And the rollout continues. Anybody else has anything to add, Dr. Chowdhury?
So sorry, Mr. First Chair. So in Singapore, I suppose there's no adverse effects reported that had scared the population. So
so far,
running full speed still.
So far,
in Hong Kong, we had been. Yeah, in Hong Kong, our turbo was stopped suddenly because of the diabetic man dying from it.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's very difficult for Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Well, excuse me, Mr. President, I would like to ask you, some patients found taking colchicine quite discomfortable because they had diarrhea and abdominal discomfort taking colchicine. So they resisted to take the colchicine. What alternative could we have?
See, colchicine can cause in some people allergy. It's specifically itching. It can cause diarrhea. It all depends upon your dose. So I would give only 0.5 milligram. People have recommend 0.5 milligram plus 0.5 milligram. And if you have diarrhea or abdominal discomfort, you can make it twice alternate day or twice a week.
Twice a week?
Yes.
I see. Thank you.
It is a non-specific mechanism. It works at the level of nuclear factor kappa B pathway. It reduces NLRP pathway. Even if you take twice a week, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Dear KK, can I ask a
Yes,
question which is a little not directly connected? We know that in the feces, the viral count is very low, but it seems that in China, all the foreigners who come, they are going to do an anal swab test. What is the relevance?
So they have now in China, there has been reactions from all over the world, whether it is scientifically correct or not. So they are taking an anal swab. The swab is put inside and rotated, and then they check the spot presence of the virus or not. But if they are doing it only for the foreigners, it is a discrimination. We definitely, the chair can take it up as an agenda. And if it is being done as a part of routine to everybody, it's okay. And then they have to come back and show the science behind it, that this is better than RT-PCR. So in China, as on today, they are doing a NL test to all the people who are entering to their country. But I have still not got the information whether they are doing it only to the foreigners or they are also doing to the Chinese people coming in, and whether they are also doing it in China in routine. If this is a country policy for everybody, it's fine. But if it is only for the foreigners, it can be debated and it should be questioned. Dr. Chong may be aware about it.
Not really, sir. Not really at all.
It has come in the media all over.
Mm.
That let me see if I may have the. Yes, this is a story which talks about what Dr. Martande Pillai has spoken about. This is called Butt and Run. China make COVID anal swab mandatory for all foreign arrivals after Japan and US blasted humiliating procedure. This has come into the Sun. That Beijing claims the procedure, which involved 5 centimeter long saline-soaked swab shoved up patient's bum, is more accurate than other on-the-spot virus tests. Doctors in China have been using the anal test on quarantined patients to check if they are free of the coronavirus. A respiratory disease medic told state media that COVID traces stray detectable for longer in poo samples than they do in the nose or throat, but they are non-replicable. They have no significance. However, the prospect of foreign visitors being swabbed up the bum has sparked controversy. Japan is calling on China to stop this. This is undignified. It causes psychological stress. So I, as a medical scientist, say it has no value because after 9 days, the virus is non-replicative.
，Sam 送出嚟嘅明明唔係所有機都有啲更新嘅，但係佢嘅質量就
So we can make a statement from CMAAO that this is unscientific because the presence of virus, even in the nose after 10 days, has no value, and the virus will be present in the rectal swab for more than 3 months, but that's non-replicative. So I'll make a statement, Dr. Pillai, based on what we have discussed. Anybody else?
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have crossed the time today.
Yes.
So I will ask chair to sum up, and after we close the live, I need 2 minutes with the CMAAO members. So let Dr. Chong finish up the meeting.
Thank you, President, and always illuminating session with you. And today we learned about the NTD region of the virus that is very critical in the coming months to years ahead. In view of the variants and the mutations that we will see. We also learned about the complications or the side effects of the vaccines and the immune mechanisms behind it. So without much further ado, thank you everyone for attending this week's meeting, and we all look forward to seeing you next week at the same time. Thank you all.
Let's close the live. That's all for today. We'll be back next week.